ਗੁਰਸ਼ਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਯਾਦਗਾਰੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਉਣ ਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਤੇ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ। ਆਪਣੀ ਕਲਾ ਨਾਲ ਲੋਕ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਜੂਝਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਵਿਲੱਖਣ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਦੇ ਮਾਲਕ ਭਾਜੀ ਗੁਰਸ਼ਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ 27 ਸਤੰਬਰ 2011 ਨੂੰ ਸਦੀਵੀ ਵਿਛੋੜਾ ਦੇ ਗਏ ਸਨ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਕਈ ਫੇਰੀਆਂ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਮਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਥਾਂ ਸਥਾਪਿਤ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਸੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਲਿਆਉਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਪਾਨਾ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀ ਅਤੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਹਰੀ ਸ਼ਰਮਾ ਨੇ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਪਾਇਆ ਸੀ। ਲੋਕ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਰਾਖੀ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਦਾ ਅਹਿਸਾਸ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਹਰੀ ਸ਼ਰਮਾ ਫਾਊਂਡੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਇਸ ਮਕਸਦ ਲਈ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਮਾਲ, ਚਿੰਨ ਬੈਨਰਜੀ, ਰਾਜ ਚੌਹਾਨ, ਚਰਨਪਾਲ ਗਿੱਲ, ਸਰਵਣ ਬੋਲ, ਸੁਖਵੰਤ ਹੁੰਦਲ, ਮੱਖਣ ਟੁੱਟ, ਪਾਲ ਵਿਨਿੰਗ ਅਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਦੋਸਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਕਾਇਮ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਗੁਰਸ਼ਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਯਾਦਗਾਰੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਲੜੀ ਦਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਹ ਚੌਥਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਹੈ। ਪਹਿਲੇ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਜਗਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਦੂਜੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਨਵਸ਼ਰਨ ਅਤੇ ਅਤੁਲ ਸੂਦ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਅਤੇ ਤੀਜੇ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਰੰਗਕਰਮੀ ਸੈਮੂਅਲ ਜੌਨ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਸਨ। ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਵਾਰ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਵਿਲੱਖਣ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਆਨੰਦ ਤਿਲਤੁੰਬੜੇ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਸਾਂਝੇ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਅੱਗੇ ਚੱਲ ਕੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਚਿੰਨ ਬੈਨਰਜੀ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਵਾਰ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰਸ਼ਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਯਾਦਗਾਰੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਅੰਬੇਦਕਰ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਭਾਸ਼ਣ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਗੁਰਸ਼ਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਅਤੇ ਅੰਬੇਦਕਰ, ਡਾਕਟਰ ਅੰਬੇਦਕਰ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਰਪਿਤ ਆ। ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੋਸਤ ਜੈ ਵਿਰਦੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਦੱਸਣ। ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਅਨਾਊਂਸਮੈਂਟਸ ਹੈ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੀਆਂ। ਰੈਡੀਕਲ ਦੇਸੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਗੁਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਹੋਣੀ ਸੂਚਨਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਾਂ, ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨੂੰ 3 ਵਜੇ ਹਾਲੈਂਡ ਪਾਰਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੈਡੀਕਲ ਦੇਸੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਜ਼ਬਰ ਵਿਰੁੱਧ ਇੱਕ ਰੈਲੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਆ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹੁੰਚਣ ਦਾ ਲਈ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਅਤੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਰੈਡੀਕਲ ਦੇਸੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੁਛ ਕਾਪੀਆਂ ਪਈਆਂ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। So welcome to the Gursharan Singh Memorial Lecture. The committee that was formed after Gursharan Singh passed away in 2011 has been holding these lectures every second year or so. This is the 4th lecture in that series. And today we have Dr. Anand Teltumbde with us, who will share his thoughts on what's happening in India, especially with left and the Dalit movement, their relationship and what is possible, what is not between these two main concerns. The left has for the whole society and the problem of the Dalit community, and as we all know from what we know from coming from India. So it should be an interesting evening, and we will have a question and answer period after they finish the lecture. Right now, I'll ask Jai Virdi to come and tell us about the Dr. Ambedkar part of this lecture series. Is he here? Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Brother Sadhu, and everyone, all the friends who are here. On behalf of Chetna Association of Canada, we'd like to welcome you to these lectures that have been planned in partnership with various organizations. So before I start, let me salute you by remembering Baba Saheb Dr. Ambedkar by saying, Jai Bhim, Jai Bharat, everyone. Chetna Association of Canada was established in 1997, so we have been around for some time. That does not mean the philosophy or the work our group is doing was not happening before. So this is part of the journey, and we joined this journey in 1997. Chetna, as most of you will know, means awareness. So we believe that to create any kind of social, any kind of change, you have to start with creating an awareness. In order to make that transformation happen, we also take the inspiration from the teaching of Dr. Ambedkar, who, in our view, gave 3 mantras. One of those mantras is education, second one is agitation, and third one is organization. So in order to understand the environment we are functioning in, it's important that we educate ourselves, not only in terms of academic sector, but in terms of bringing about the critical thought in us and analyzing the situation as critically as is possible. We also believe that no change can be brought about by one person or by one organization. So we believe in creating partnerships. And I'm really grateful that in the past, we initiated Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar Memorial Lectures in partnership with the Institute for the Humanities at Simon Fraser University. This year, our friends, brother Chinbhai, Harinder, Sadhu, they brought the opportunity in front of us. They says, we have Gursharan Memorial Lecture, Dr. Anand Teltumbde is going to be the guest. Could we look at creating this partnership? So I just wanted to say thank you to our friends and their organization for bringing this opportunity in front of us and creating the unity that I believe Brother Anand will be talking about later. I also want to reflect on one message that still has been ingrained in my mind. That is, when I was studying at Simon Fraser University, Brother Sadhu, he was teaching us in sociology. And one of the things he brought forward was the similarities between the Dalit movement in India and the Afro-American struggle. And the point that he brought forward was that any issues, any social issues, are not belonging to just one community. Community as a large also suffers when the symptoms of the issues are coming about. So what I picked up was that when you see symptoms, it's not affecting just blacks or just Dalits or First Nations communities. At the end of the day, it affects everyone. So if it affects everyone, we want to, and we should be, working together. So it is in this spirit I'm here, and I feel very honored and privileged to be partner in this organization and in this event. I would also like to acknowledge some of our friends who have came from out of town to support this lecture. One is my friend Tanmay Wagmare. He came from Seattle. He's with Ambedkar International Mission, the Seattle unit. So I want to acknowledge Brother Tanmay, if you could raise your hand. I would also like to welcome our friend, Mr. Major Mal, who came from Calgary. Major Mal, he's in the back. So Major Mal is also involved with the organization called Ambedkar International Mission, and they have biennial Dr. Ambedkar Memorial Lectures in partnership with the University of Calgary. So what we're doing is on the same platform and same thinking. I'd also like to welcome my friend. We went to college together in Prince George, Satwant Binning, and he came from Atlanta to support this lecture and some of the other events we're having. Satwant is here. And last but not least, my brother, Counselor Dave Birdie, he came from Fort St. James. So I'd like to acknowledge and welcome him. From Chetna Association, we have Assistant Secretary, Mr. Harmesh Chander. He's the Assistant Secretary of, Harish Chander. He's the Assistant Secretary of Chetna Association. He teaches at BCIT. So please give him a round of applause, Mr. Okay. So without any further ado, without taking any more time, because I want to listen, I want to learn from Brother Teltumbde. So please join me in thanking the organizers and all the partners for bringing us together. Jai Bhim, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, Brother Jay. The message of Dr. Ambedkar resonates for us forever. Educate, agitate, organize. These are the three essential mantras and words for all of us who are here and who have been, all of us who have been working for several years trying to do just that in our community. I would just like to add one more word, which Jay brought up, which is, I think, fundamentally important to add to this: unite. We need to unite to carry on the work of education, agitation, and organization. It's a great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Anand Teltumbde. He is a very interesting character. He has his record is essentially in business management, believe it or not. Now, he is a senior professor of business management currently in Goa. He has been a professor of business management in IIT Kharagpur, in all these elite institutions. So he operates at that level. Not only that, even worse, he has been a magnate in industry. He has been working at a fairly top level in industry, and in fact, in what many of us consider our enemy, the oil industry. He has had extensive experience in oil from at all levels, and give you lectures about pipelines and monitoring and how to detect breaks in pipes and all that sort of stuff, with which we are all of us concerned very much. He can give you a lecture on how these things are done and so on. So he has got extensive experience in the oil industry from the bottom to the top. He has been sitting with all these big CEOs, et cetera, and dealing with them. And yet, we have invited him to give us this lecture here. What brings him here? Because he has got a Jekyll and a Hyde side. The other side that he has is the agitate and organize part. He has grown up in a Dalit background. He has worked all his life, from student on, with workers and their struggles. He comes from a family of landless laborers in Vidarbha, in Maharashtra, the area which is notorious and in fact has a record number of farmer suicides. So we talk about farmer suicides and as one of the great symbols of what is going on in India. You may remember P. Sainath. There's a film on him that some of us screened here called Nero's Guests, dealing with farmer suicide, how the Indian elite are the Nero's guests who are feasting while the bodies of the slaves and prisoners are being burnt to illuminate Nero's garden. Now, he comes from that region, and he has been involved in student politics. He has been involved in the struggles of construction workers and casual labor in West Bengal, and and the struggles of textile workers and slum dwellers in Mumbai, and contract workers. He is associated with the Committee for the Protection of Democratic Rights and has investigated many atrocities. And he is associated with the All India Forum for Right to Education. He is a leading public intellectual. He writes and speaks extensively on issues of caste, class, people's struggles, public policy, and democratic politics in India and abroad. He has written extensively in newspapers, magazines, published pamphlets and booklets to aid the struggling masses. He has authored 20 books which have been translated into many languages, many Indian languages. He is a regular contributor to the Economic and Political Weekly, the leading journal of social studies in India, and regularly contributes to Mainstream, Frontier, Seminar, and several other English and Marathi newspapers. So we are really honored to have Dr. Anand Teltumbde here with us, because he, apart from all this, he really works very closely with student movements today, and wherever there's an agitation, you can be sure that Dr. Teltumbde is there, whether it's in Hyderabad to investigate the criminal suicide, the imposed, coerced suicide of the scholar Rohit Vemula. He has been involved in Jawaharlal Nehru University, while the university was under attack from the state. So Dr. Teltumbde, and he has been involved in Gujarat, in Una, in the struggle of the Dalits in Una. So it's a great honor to have somebody with us who spans such a wide range of activities and different levels of work. So thank you very much for being with us here, and I welcome Dr. Teltumbde and invite him to talk to us.
Good afternoon, friends. At the outset, I wish to thank Dr. Hari Sharma Foundation, Chetna Association for having me here and paying my homage in a very different way to one of our comrades, Gursharan Singh. It's interesting. Let me say that I did not have an occasion. I was about to ask Harinder or Chin about the background of Gursharan Singh. And before that, Harinder told me that Gursharan Singh did not have anything to do with Canada, but actually he worked in Punjab and was something like Varavara Rao of Punjab. Then I realized, you would be surprised, that this person, I almost placed him, that I met him several times. He was a part of our organization, All India League for Revolutionary Culture, and we had many meetings. He was probably the executive committee member also, and I was also executive committee member, and we met several times. So it's a great occasion to pay homage to one of the comrades in a very, very interesting manner. Until I landed up in Canada, I did not know anything that is the same person or something like that, and very pleasantly came to know that he's the same Gursharan Singh. So be it. I'm told that we have to vacate the hall at 4 o'clock. Actually, I prepared, as I do, memorial lectures are a very special occasions, and most of my memorial lectures have been published in the booklet forms. So I too wrote a very longish kind of lecture, 26 type pages, but I'm not going to go into that because we'll not have definitely time for that. It's an interesting topic and very, very burning topic in India today. The caste, class, saffron, because all these things are happening in India in a very interesting way. Blue, red, and saffron. So blue is associated with caste, mainly Dalits, mistakenly taken as something like a symbol of their color. Not many people know that blue also was red to start with. So what happened to blue thereafter is a question. Red, all people know, that is identified with communists. And saffron, the newest menace that India is facing, the all working classes are facing in India, is saffron. So this is a very burning topic and could have been discussed in anywhere in India too. So what is the relationship between these three things that we would probably look at? What is the difference? What is the relation between caste and class? This is a $1 million question because a lot of political scientists or Marxists and so-called Dalit scholars, etc., struggle with this. What is the relation between this? And they try to decipher what is class, what is caste, how do they come together, and so on and so forth. To my mind, it's an idiotic duality which has cost us a revolution. And the folly which has been responsible for this duality has been mainly reds. So I would explain in short that part, and then we will go over to the present situation in India. So that would be, I think, appropriate, and that would take us to the time allotted. Caste is a very peculiar institution. There have been social stratification in all ancient societies. But that could be sort of likened to the Varna system, classical Varna system in India, not caste system. Caste is a very peculiar thing. Now, there are plethora of theories about caste also, how they originated and all that thing. We again don't have to go into that. But when I started actually looking at these issues seriously, then I had my own theory. Because it is not that somebody comes and writes something and the social institutions or systems actually get into being. That is not the case. There has to be some material reason for such kind of things to have come into being. And that looking that way, then I actually had my own kinds of theory that the origin of caste system or the actually could be attributed the peculiar natural endowment and rich endowment of this subcontinent. What happened is when the nomadic tribes actually started settling for agriculture, all over the world, they underwent the social change. In India, they did not have to. There was a huge fertile land, everything that is required or ideally spoken about for biotic production was there in Indian subcontinent, and all these nomadic tribes actually settled without undergoing any social formation, change, and they were the caste. Today also, in 21st century, after so many years, if we have something like surnames or some such ways, these are the tribal totems that actually we flaunt. So castes have come into being before, and thereafter the Varna, these Aryans, etc. came in, whosoever they were, actually brought in their Varna system and superimposed that. And that rather induced the sense of hierarchy among castes, because when castes formed or tribals settled, there was no sense of hierarchy. Later on, these kinds of Varna institutions actually brought in the sense of hierarchy. So this is the way of thinking. Now, how these were theorized later on, because all agriculture societies have mumbo jumbos, etc., and the priestly class comes into being, and this and that, and they formalized and rigidified the caste system. This is what, according to my understanding, is the origin or development of caste system. Now, this caste system, how it survived so long? Arguably, this is the longest surviving man-made system in the world. There is nothing beyond caste system that survives in the world. So how did it survive? So what happened is, with all kinds of economic, political changes, etc., because many people, this was a very, very fertile land, and people, outside people actually kept on coming. The hordes actually kept on sort of entering India from northern borders, and the changes started coming from north to south. Then it started flowing. In course of time, with all these kinds of mechanisms, the caste system became a life world of the people. This life world of the people actually remained intact, surviving all these kinds of changes that crept in India. It is said that Shamanism versus Brahmanism, etc., Brahmanism being the creed of the Brahmins, the priestly class, all these kinds of things are spoken about. And Shamanism, that is true. Shamanism manifested thereafter into something like an institutionalized religion in the form of Jainism and Buddhism. Buddhism had a hegemony of something like 700, 800 years, solid hegemony. But I find that this Buddhism, although ideologically was opposed to Brahmanism, it did not make any dent to this life world, and caste survived. Okay? This has the support of many other scholars also. This is my logical formulation, but it has the support of many more scholars, serious scholars, that Buddhism also did not make. The first dent that caste system had was from in a medieval times, when the Muslims started actually stabilizing. There was an exodus of sort of the lower caste people who escaped the caste system and became Muslims. That was the first tangible kind of denting that the caste system suffered, a demographic kind of thing. And thereafter, of course, the British colonial system came in, and there lot many changes came in, and being the relatively modern kind of history, we do know what kind of changes. The birth of Dalit movement, etc., could be directly attributed to this kinds of changes. Babasaheb Ambedkar, who actually dawned on the Dalit horizon, also is a product of this colonial kinds of changes. Both ways, like mother side, father side, Babasaheb Ambedkar had two generations of the military history, the army history, etc. So all these kinds of things have happened. So this is an important background, because there are a lot of misconceptions about the caste per se. Now, what is class? Class is spoken, and again, it's an idiotically spoken in as something like an economic category, nothing to do with something like other things of other aspects of life. Marx. Now, class has come into being many ways. Before Marx also the class was spoken about, but Marx basically talked about class as a category which would be which actually brings in the change. Marx formulated, as a young Hegelian, he looked at the world, etc., and he formulated something like, meaning he discovered rather that dialectical materialism was the basic to the change processes anywhere, material, non-material world, anything that this is the principle which actually drives the change. Now he looked at the history and conceived that history, because he was finding out something like a pluses and minuses behind the historical change, and he found out that the classes were the harbinger of change. that there were classes in human society, and they, through their contradiction, they struggled, and when the struggle actually reached the zenith, it transformed into something like a qualitative change. So this way, this was the conception of class. The first time, while he actually studied all through the human evolution, he found that in capitalism, first time, these classes and class struggle comes in the something like a very pristine form. So there would be a major, predominant kinds of classes like bourgeois and proletariat comes into being. It doesn't mean that other classes do not exist, etc., but these are the principal classes in contradiction, and then he prophesied that with this kind of contradiction in the form of class struggle, reaching the zenith would actually usher into socialism. So this is the Marxian formulation. Now how does it relate with the caste? Now Marx and Engels did not define class. They did actually left many things undefined. Lenin, who had to translate Marxism into something like revolution, actually defined class. And I would not go into my papers, etc., giving the definition, but it's actually floating on the net as you see. So what does Lenin say? Lenin brings in the relationship, the historical determined relationship between people. He talks about the economic kinds of relationship, things, etc. If we relate that with what is obtaining in India, you would find that the caste also could be conceived as classes. Because if you think that entire history is entire known history, the history is the history of class struggle, then how could the life world of some people could be kept aside and considered classes? That is the fundamental question that needs to be asked in the context of communism in India. So this is the folly they made. Now how does mistake comes into being? So who were the early Marxists that came into India? Indian Communist Party of India was formally formed in 1925, but there were many groups that had formed into the urban centers in India, which were inspired by the Bolshevik Revolution in 17. And these people typically belong to high caste and a middle class kind of English educated people who got inspiration and who were getting the feed from the smuggled literature from Russia and Britain. So these people thought, it was something like a borrowed understanding or something like a secondary literature on which they were read, and they thought that looking at India, because they did not have a direct interface with the caste also because they were the urban-centric people. So that experiential kinds of feeling also was absent. And then they thought that these kinds of things do exist because anybody in India cannot escape knowing caste. So that is not that they did not know of caste, etc., but they thought that all these kinds of things are cultural, religious, all kinds of, and it belongs to superstructure. Marx had uttered, there was initially Marx did speak about these kinds of things, but then Marx had actually explained, in German ideology and thereafter the critique of this. Anyway, so Marx gave it like a metaphor called base and superstructure. There are certain things. The base actually is the economic base, and there over that base, there develops the superstructure, which is the legal, religious, social, etc., cultural superstructure. And these communists actually relegated the caste system to the superstructure. So all of you know that in 20s, typically all these movements were born in communist movement, Dalit movement, formal Dalit movement, because at the dawn of century, again, it's not necessarily that 20s only the Dalit movement is born, but it goes back a little before. But all these people, all these movements like communist movement, Dalit movement, and the Hindutva movement, all were born in 20s. So when Baba Saheb Ambedkar started and took up the caste issue as the foremost kind of problem in India, communists almost ridiculed him. Because according to this formulation, like this was a superstructural struggle. Without changing the base, how could the superstructure be fought against? That was their ideological position. So in Bombay communists that Ambedkar primarily confronted, basically had something like a ridiculing attitude towards this entire Dalit movement or Ambedkar's movement. Now, a little bit about Ambedkar. Now, Ambedkar was no Marxist. Okay, when he landed up in Columbia, etc., it was a horizon opened up for him. That it was something first time he was seeing that science caste kind of atmosphere, and was quite impressed. And he busied himself, as amassing as much knowledge as possible. Something like, these minor things also are important, because almost he had taken more than 150% of the credits which was required for his degrees. Okay? And if you chronologically put it, so there is a kind of thirst for knowledge that underscores his stay in Columbia. Once he actually finishes the studies, he actually rushes to join again London School of Economics and enrolls himself as a graduate student. So all these kinds of things are important to underscore the kinds of influences he had. And not to be inferred, but he himself actually verbalized also that John Dewey, one of his professors, had a very deep influence on him. John Dewey was none other than the progenitor of the pragmatism, one of the very important philosophers of this pragmatic philosophy. And he had forsaken the Hegelian idea of something like instrumentality of idea, and in place of that, he actually instituted something like instrumentality of knowledge. That if the enlightened class, it actually comes through the education, an enlightened class could really bring about or lead the society to change, that kinds of ideas. And John Dewey, in addition, it is not a fragmented kind of thing, in addition was a Fabian. There was a Fabian movement that actually came into being in England, and there was a parallel kind of stream that was in America, and he was the president of it until he died. So this was the profile, and this was the influence of Ambedkar. So Ambedkar was no Marxist, but he was deeply concerned about the goals, and he was marking it that the goals of emancipation that Marx had is very similar to all these things. Now, the first of the essay that gets published by Ambedkar, the first essay that he writes as a student in 1916 in Columbia, and almost the last lecture that he delivers in Kathmandu, Buddha and Karl Marx, both actually are to be marked. And in between there is a lot of references, etc., about the caste or the pluses and minuses about the communism and Marxism and so on and so forth. So if you mark this kind of bracketing essays like caste, where he defines that class is nothing but the enclosed classes, okay? And there is much more to that, etc. In my written stuff, it is analyzed. And the last lecture that he gives in Kathmandu is Buddha and Karl Marx, wherein he says that the goal of Buddha and Marx was the same. Okay? But their method differ. And he says, because he had already embraced Buddhism, and there he says that the method differs, and Buddha's methods are better. In what way? He actually faults Marxism for two things. One is its reliance on violence, and second thing is its denial of democracy. So reliance on violence, that he actually brings in something like a force and the dictatorship of proletariat for the denial of democracy. So these kinds of things he actually faults Marxism for and takes Buddha's methods being superior. So this is the Ambedkar's conception of thing. But Ambedkar was in between. He was quite attracted towards something like the Marxian kind of movement you can say, not a philosophy, the movement could be a friend of Dalits. Now, in the wake of 1937 elections, he forms a party, Independent Labour Party. Okay? Arguably, this is the first left party that was formed in India. Because until then, the communists were actually operating as a socialist bloc under Congress. Okay? And this party, as I said in the beginning, that blue itself was a red. This party had a manifesto. He defined himself as a working class leader. This party was the working class party. And it had adopted in 1940 a red flag with 11 stars in the left-hand top corner of the flag. So it was a red flag. To start with, the Dalits flag also was red. So there is nothing like a dichotomous thing, blue and red, but it's a red and red only. Okay? Where did the things go wrong? The things went wrong in many ways. And you would actually pinpoint the communist behavior. Again, not the theory, but the practice of communists, that Ambedkar got increasingly antagonized. And the two movement actually went on a divergent path. Okay? There are certain markers. In textile mills in Bombay, when the struggle was going on, so the attitude of the communists was that if we take up an issue, it is not that they were not sensitive to this kinds of thing. As I said, that nobody in India can be innocent about the caste. So these people also did know. And when there was a palpable kind of Dalit movement, that time they did know that these are the problems with caste and needed to be tackled. But they were afraid that if we take up these issues, the caste Hindu workers, etc., would be antagonized. Okay, and there would be division of working class. So that kind of attitude, they did not do anything about the caste and actually remained silent about the kind of discriminations of the Dalit workers. What were the discrimination? In textile mill, there were Dalit workers. There used to be separate features, water features for the Dalit, So there was something like untouchability followed, where among the workers, where communists had a complete control. Second thing, that Dalit workers were not allowed in the weaving section, because in weaving section, that if the thread broke, then the human saliva was used to join that. And the caste workers would grudge really touch the kind of thread joined with the Dalit saliva. So these kinds of things. So when it was pointed out, Ambedkar told these people that, okay, better you mend that, because 1928, in the wake of that strike, Ambedkar put a condition that if you mend this kinds of thing, then we would join. These people still did not do anything, and 1929, really Ambedkar had to pull out Dalit workers, and he broke the strike. So this kind of thing, and later on that some way it was patched up and all. So this is going on. If you actually go into details, you would find that there were Brahminic people actually followed in this strike, the separate kinds of kitchens, separate kinds of thing, and flaunting their superior status in the caste system. So these kinds of behavior actually alienated and went on alienating Ambedkar from communism. And there are tidbits thereafter, that saying against the communists and this and that, etc., which get capitalized by the vested interest in Dalit to make Dalits or make Ambedkar as a totally against communists. So this is what is important. Certain again evidences how Ambedkar was attracted towards communists, etc. In 1960s only the formal translation of Capital was published in India. In Marathi, the newspapers that Ambedkar ran, he ran 3 newspapers, Muknayak, Bahishkrit Bharat, and thereafter Janata. So actually this thing was published, Ambedkar's, the Marxist Value, Labor and Capital was translated and published way back in 1930s. So you have to mind it. All these kinds of things, I'm saying that there are still misconceptions with which this red and blue is pitched against each other. Now, as I said, this duality and the idiotic duality, I do not have a shame in calling that, and nobody knows that, actually cost us a revolution. If you lose a revolution, you gain a counter-revolution. Hindutva is directly a counter-revolution. So it is to be understood in that context that because these reds and blues have gone on a divergent path, that created a soil for rise of Hindutva, the upsurge of Hindutva. As regards Hindutva, there are it's not very difficult to see the genesis of these kinds of creed, because these upper caste, meaning Brahminic classes, were always disturbed for much of its history that their kingdom was lost. So initially they resisted whenever anything happened, like Muslims came in and ruled over, etc. So there was an initial resistance, but then when they thought that it is not working, then they patched it up and remained satisfied with the social hegemony. The same behavior you will find during the colonial colonial regime also. Afterward, when in 20th century, then this movement started, the educated class, English educated class emerged, and they started realizing the folly of their traditions and customs, etc., and the reform movement sort of started. So there were 2 streams of reform movement. One stream actually was a bit of ashamed of their evil, and they started, represented by, say, Brahmo Samaj in Bengal and Prarthana Samaj in Maharashtra, for instance. And another stream zealously thought that there was nothing wrong, and Hinduism was actually polluted by other kinds of influences, and they have to sort of purify, they have to take the original form of it, and they started a reform movement, which could be, again, 2 examples could be seen in that context. Ramakrishna Vivekananda's movement again started from Bengal, and Arya Samaj. Arya Samaj was technically formed in Bombay, but Arya Samaj, which actually gained coinage in or more influence in UP and Uttar Pradesh like thing. This Arya Samaj is a direct harbinger of Hindutva movement. Before that, even Maharashtra, when the 1818 Battle of Koregaon, it was fought by the Mahar soldiers, Mahars and Namashudra soldiers on behalf of English, and they defeated the Peshwa, the last remnant of the thing, and that also was grudged by the Brahminic forces. So there was an armed movement, in Maharashtra, all these Chapekar Bandhus, Vasudev Bandhan Phadke, and all these things for their regaining the lost kingdom, that kind of thing. And look at the communist folly. They were actually typified the revolutionaries. So this is the kind of understanding, the mechanical understanding of communists actually has been causing the alienation of the Dalits. Lokmanya Tilak can be traced directly as an ideologue. Savarkar and all those kinds of people who get identified thereafter with the Hindutva movement, actually he was the father figure for them. So this way actually started. initially from this Arya Sabhas. When Dayanand Saraswati died in 1883, there was Hindu Sabhas formed in Punjab. In 84, almost all districts of Punjab had Hindu Sabhas. Okay? 85, Congress gets formed. And it is in history, mainstream history, it is recorded that Hindu Mahasabha's foundation was in response to the formation of the Muslim in 1906. It is not. The Hindu Mahasabha had already formed in the form of this thing. It was formalized in 1915. Hindu Mahasabha, speaking for Hindus, actually did not work because British acknowledged the Congress to be the representative of the Hindus, okay, as against Muslims. 1909, Morlamento reforms came. That time, Muslim League prompted that Dalits and Adivasis were not the part of the Hindus. And that created kind of rip, which Ambedkar used thereafter to expand the space for himself and a movement. So these are the kinds of historical things. Now, I'm skipping much more than that and coming on to what is Hindutva in essence. What do these people want? Hindutva in essence, and there is nothing again one needs to belabor to infer out of their things, etc. They themselves say it. RSS founded, meaning I was talking about something like Hindu Mahasabha. Hindu Mahasabha did not make a dent because it had to compete with the Congress as a representative of Hindus, and they remained dormant. Because this did not click in politics, so they actually started the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. These people were all linked, in apparent terms they do not appear to be linked, etc., but they were all linked. So in Nagpur, they started Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Initially, all these, meaning surreptitiously mobilizing Hindus, etc., through the shakhas, etc., was the activity. And they had to be indoctrinated, that those kinds of people had to be indoctrinated. So the Baudhiks, they traced the lectures, etc., etc., or RSS called them a Baudhik. So these were their focus points. Later on, M.S. Golwalkar, after Hedgewar died, and M.S. Golwalkar took over, he had a very poisonous kind of meaning. He had directly imparted the ideological shape to the organization. And that ideological material he actually picked up from Hitler and Mussolini. So there is plethora of references to that kind of thing. Then after Golwalkar, there's probably the lowest profile Sarsanghcha Chalak, like Bala Saheb Devras. He came and he imparted a strategic dimension to this organization. Until then, Ambedkar was totally ignored. Dalits were totally ignored. They did not want it because Ambedkar was so vitriolic in criticism of Hinduism, etc., that they could not contain. And just post-Ambedkar kind of thing, Dalit movement also was a lively movement. So they could not touch. So for quite some time, they ignored this part of it. But by the time Devras came and the ideological diffusion or confusion, etc., entered Dalit movement, the Republican Party split into many fragments, the people started going over, and by 60s, etc., Dalit movement was in disarray. Even the Congress had taken note. There was a land satyagraha, nationwide land satyagraha led by Dada Saheb Gaikwad, one of the leaders of the Dalit movement, post-Ambedkar Dalit movement, which actually shocked the Congress establishment. Lal Bahadur Shastri was the Prime Minister then, and they actually forged a co-optation strategy, which formally started taking away all the opportunistic Dalit leaders to their fold. So this started happening. So Dalit thing was totally weakened, and that time RSS started strategizing to make inroads in there. So otherwise, until then, the non-Ambedkarite Dalits were their mainstay, and they had already attracted. They had started a work among the Adivasis, Hinduizing them, casteizing them, and everything was happening. But the Ambedkarite Dalit, the mainstay of Dalit, or normally Dalits are referred to or identified with, that kind of work started with this kind of Devrasi strategy. So very surreptitiously, they made Ambedkar as a Pratasmaraniya. Okay, RSS had their people, to be remembered in the morning. So Ambedkar became a Pratasmaraniya. And afterward, in 1983, they floated an organization called Samajik Samarasta Manch. So it is not equality, but something like a harmony, social harmony, and this and that. Not many Dalit intellectuals could discern this difference and fell prey to that in Maharashtra initially, and it goes on because that was created a flare, etc. And those people who had gone over to the RSS came back saying, okay, we regret. So this kind of thing started. They started producing literature, slowly saffronizing kind of thing. Ambedkar was friends of Hedgewar. He was the benefactor of Hindus and this and that and all. All these kinds of things started. And the people who initiated that RSS will not take part into politics. It's a totally cultural, Hindu cultural organization, floated a party called Bharatiya Janasangha in 1951 and started getting involved into politics and economics too. They had an economics wing also and started actually amassing money and everything. Janasangha, however, did not make a dent. They piggybacked on Jayaprakash Narayan's movement and got catapulted to the mainstream. All that history is known. In the wake of emergency, then they got a lot of meaning a lot of these leaders, etc., went in jails, etc., and they got that aura of fighting for democracy. 1977, Janata Party came to power and they tested power. And then again, on a dual membership issue, the Janata Party was broken. Then they formed today's avatar, Bharatiya Janata Party, and again they actually remained kind of a marginal force in politics. What happens is that thereafter, after assassination of Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi comes, and his political navet actually plays out and becomes handy for these Hindutva forces to grab political power. So from there on, like Rajiv Gandhi's mishandling of the Shah Banu case, I hope some of you at least would know, Shah Banu case, then opening up the Ram Lalla temple in Ayodhya, all these things were exploited to the hilt by Janata Party. Advani became a president, and he actually aggressively strategized for the Rama Janmabhoomi issue, and therefore after the galvanization started taking place. 84, these people had just 2 MPs in parliament. 89, in the wake of this Rama Janmabhoomi agitation, their strength went up to 86. And thereafter, there was nothing to look back. Thereafter, they went on rising in their vote share as well as the numbers. And ultimately, they grabbed the power. Okay? Initially for 13 days, thereafter 13 months, and thereafter a full term. So they tested power with Atal Bihari Vajpayee as Prime Minister. Now for 2 terms, the UPA was in power. The initial thing was okay, but UPA too was actually, there were a series of scandals and all those kinds of stagnant kind of things, so that is also known to Indians. And in the wake of that, the current formation came to power, 1914. Mind it first time BJP got a clear majority in Lok Sabha, and however, with just 31% votes. It's less than 1/3 votes. But what they thought is that if they have realized that unless now they are aggressive, because their game plan, to accomplish Hindu Rashtra is now in a touchable distance. And they had to something like go very aggressive. So this is the strategy actually unfolding all kinds of menace in India. Now, they have already, in an organizational term, they are hydra-headed organizations. So they have lots of things, extreme rabid kind of fellows to a very, very reasonable sounding liberal kinds of thing. And there would be hundreds of organizations in between. So they would test it out. So there is something called a monkey brigade of RSS, which actually takes up an issue. Something like Ghar Wapsi or Bahu Lao, Beti Bachao or Lao Jihad or some such kind of thing, and n number of things. I would part this thing and it would be available probably in whatever form to you for reading, but I am just rushing to complete within time. So all these kinds of things have been there, and they would test it out. They would retreat. If it doesn't, if there is something like a backlash, etc., they would retreat also. But the message would be gone to the people, and they would take it over. So this kind of game is going on, and it is actually menacing the lower strata. Where Dalits stand in the schema? Because they do know that any incremental kinds of things, any incremental vote percent would bring them the enhanced gains. Okay? They realized in Devras's time itself, initially they thought that with the civil war kind of thing, polarizing people on communal lines, etc., might bring in a civil war and they will grab power, etc. Those things, etc., were not working. They realized their strength and started clearly seeing that their path to the Hindu Rashtra is through the constitutional framework. They had to, otherwise they had not contributed to anything. They were not recognizing Indian constitution, no insignia of Indian Republic, and all that kind of thing. That is a historical fact. But then realized and slowly retreated. And concentrated on something like grabbing as much votes as possible. Dalit vote bank becomes very handy and it comes very cheap. And that way they started focusing on Dalit. Now what is the attitude toward Dalit? Now it's very obvious, it's naked. Ambedkar comes out as an icon for Dalits, okay? Over the years, the ruling class has built it, and the Dalits also, because of their nostalgic kind of thing, because the bankruptcy of Dalit leadership, etc., started again. Dalits started looking at Ambedkar as a sort of demigod. So that Ambedkar's iconization was a complete thing. So if Ambedkar could be kind of promoted, the Dalit people automatically will think that, oh, this thing, this party or these people are really pro-Dalits. Okay? So this is, with this kind of attitude, the Modi-like person, the Modi's background, it's written here, what his attitude towards Ambedkar, Dalit was, etc. is written here. I'm not going to touch upon that. So as Modi comes to, or from the, meaning, in the wake of 14 election, etc., he started kind of paying obeisance to Ambedkar, showing his devotion, and is never tired of showing that he is the greatest bhakta of Ambedkar, bhakta vagera. All his words. So this is kind. So wherever they have summarily declared that wherever Ambedkar set foot, that would be monumentalized in a grand manner. They have already done so much thing. Crores of rupees are being spent on Ambedkar. On the other side, while this is the attitude to woo Dalits, on the other side, if there are something like a radical voices coming out of the Dalits, that gets crushed without any kind of thing. There are many episodes like, they are very sensitive that Dalit youth, etc., should not be actually radicalized. So there are instruments like, you do know that Muslims have been demonized world over. So for them to actually demonize Muslims or making Muslims the other in India is a very, very easy thing. Because it's taken for granted Muslims are anyway the terrorists, etc., and so on and so forth. For Dalits, there is an internal kinds of mechanism called something like a Maoist, Naxalites, Maoists, etc. So if any Dalit youth talks in radical terms, he could be labeled as Naxalite or Maoist, and could be anything can be done, because such is the propaganda in India, that even the normal public, even the Dalit themselves, because Dalit more than others would think that this fellow is, if he's a Maoist or Naxalite, etc., he is taken as an anti-Ambedkar, and anything could be done. So it is an open kind of thing, and they could be sort of done away with. They could be gunned down. They could be done anything. Now, recently you have heard about the 32 people being gunned down in Malkangiri. Who were they? They were Adivasis and Dalits. Okay? But there will not be any ripple seen from among the Dalits. Right? They will never identify. Naxalites and Maoists are not identified with Dalit and Adivasis. No Prevention of Atrocity Acts is applicable to them. No Dalits will cry for them. Okay? This is the kind of paradigm created. This is the kind of propaganda machine, thing that is created in India, that once you actually stick that label, that you are nowhere. Anything can be done to you. So, in universities, you would find that in IIT Madras, there was an Ambedkar Periyar study circle. Those people actually talked in terms of the radical kind of thing. They were organizing discussions and things like. They were crushed. They were banned. Okay? And it created a lot of furor, and then they had to withdraw, etc. Same thing happened in Hyderabad University, Central University of Hyderabad, wherein the Ambedkar Students Association started speaking little differently. They protested against the hanging of Yaqub Menon. They protested against the RSS Gundagardi in Delhi University, Karodi Mal College, when the Muzaffarnagar Baki Hai, one documentary by Nakul Sahani or friends actually was being screened. And that was picked up by the BJP fellows, etc. And the students were extraneously punished, because there is no iota of kind of thing, the kind of process they follow, which ultimately led to Rohit Vemula, Sheen referred to him, committing suicide. All these people were intimately in contact with me, so I do know what were happening. And the struggle is going on. So, so these kinds of things are rampantly going on out there. The unfortunate part of it is that Dalit movement actually is taking increasingly the identitarian kind of thing. There's some way to be attributed to neoliberal kind of ideology, but much of it is actually getting sort of engineered by the ruling classes, and these people have been falling prey. Not only now caste, Ambedkar's font kind of Dalit no more remains intact. It actually goes to Mala Madiga and subcaste kinds of politics. They do not identify that way. So as an antidote, we thought that we would create something like the anti-BJP or anti-ABVP kind of formation among the campuses, which did not happen so far. So in JNU, BAPSA came into being with a caste identities, and it was actually, meaning I was being consulted by the leftist student group, etc., and told them in a specific term that come what may, but you do not let them actually go on their own. Let them contest the elections, you support it. But these people said that they would not actually talk to them. So what do you do? So this is the kind of thing, unfortunately, coming in among the Dalits. But all the same, there are, it's the last thing, I think, I just would take 5 minutes and would end. What can be done? Things are very depressing if you just objectively describe them, the way things are going on in India. What could be done? Now, there are a lot of things that are happening. Communist parties, parliamentary communist party, for last couple of decades, they have realized that without inroads among Dalits, etc., they do not have future. Both the movements are totally marginalized, almost decimated. It stands like that. The communist parties, they have floated, like CPM to note, They have floated a separate Dalit organization to work among Dalits, etc. And somewhere, say in Tamil Nadu, it is working fine. Somewhere it has not taken root, and variously things are going. So, problem is that do you float at this juncture really a separate department to ensconce your Dalit comrades there and work for Dalits, or realize that it has to be taken in an integrated manner? Okay? When you talked about, or I tend to call something like a idiotic duality, then it comes to that the class analysis of India could have been incorporating caste within class. Okay? There is nothing like the class struggle itself becomes the umbrella struggle. There is an umbrella format of the struggle. The caste struggle, anti-caste struggle would essentially be part of that. Because unless these kinds of issues are settled, the class formation would not come into being. Now, it is not that it's not talked in puritanical term that castes are ironed out and the class emerges and all that kind of thing. But this realization should have been there in 20s, 100 years back, and at least gets reflected now. So that reflection is still not there. When it comes to this Marxian metaphor of base and superstructure, these people still keep swearing on that. Okay? When they are actually driven to, they again will do not find a fault with that. So these kinds of attitudes actually are the hurdles, ideological hurdles behind striking a unity of this. There are a ray of hopes. The youngsters among Dalits, etc., who are facing dark future, they do realize that this is the necessity of time, and they have to come together, strike a sort of friendship. And there are a lot of things that are happening in India in those kinds of things. But problem is that there are certain kinds of issues that need to be settled first. That communists, left with the advanced kinds of theories, have to take a lead. Now they have to realize that such kind of things are not going to, they have made a mistake. There is nothing in communist culture to admit the mistakes. So that they need to get over. World is actually progressing with such a pace that no isms, whichever ism, Marxism, Ambedkarism, and all these things, actually should be taken as a past. They could be back in, the kind of vision that all these great people have given, that stands. But in methodological terms, probably no ism is going to work for the world. So method actually will have to be configured ourselves. So that kind of internalization should be there. Now, these patch-up kind of approaches from the left, etc., are not going to work because Dalits have come to maturity, and they do understand that there has to be something like an ideological ironing out with utmost honesty, approaching the things. That is for there. Dalit at the last should realize that howsoever they work, okay, the annihilation of caste, which tends to be forgotten in Dalit universe, nobody talks of annihilation of caste, but it actually, all the practices are veering to strengthening the caste. So this is an unfortunate development, but if actually one goes back to Ambedkar's dictum, then annihilation of caste is not possible unless the larger amount of working classes actually own up the issue. So without revolution, I can say, and I've been saying, that without annihilation, there is no annihilation of caste. And without annihilation of caste, there is no Indian revolution. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Teltumbde. We have some time for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I see a couple there, back there. Be brief with your question so we can have more people participating. Just a second.
My name is Gursharan, and I am finding it difficult to speak coherently because I am quite aged. But I want to make a small contribution. First of all, I wonder at the knowledge and the experience our learned speaker has shown in his lecture. Now, I want to make a few comments about this class versus caste and the Dalit movement versus the communist movement. He has very rightly pointed out the defects in the understanding of the Communist Party, the real position in India. Actually, the Shudras, the untouchables, were the real proletariat of India, and they should have got the first attention of the communist people. But they did not, because they came from the high caste and they were armchair politicians, more interested in the Brahmanical interpretation of communism rather than its application to the situation in India. If they had started taking interest in the struggle of the poor people, they would have learned much that caste is such an important factor in this, and they would have progressed. Anyway, they made a mistake. But I want to point out one more thing. Our learned speaker has said that they are learning, they have learned. I feel they have not. And I want to give you one example. In Andhra, there is one lady called, her name is Nayakamma, if I remember it. She wrote a book in actually Telugu to begin with. The title of her book was that Dr. Ambedkar is not needed, Buddhism is useless, simply communism is the solution to the Dalit problem. Now that book was translated into English, and from English, Mr. Bhuta Singh translated into Punjabi. I happened to read that book, and I was so sorry that after so much of, suffering by the communist movement, they have not learned anything. It should be very clear to the communists that Ambedkar had made a very good contribution to the uplift of the scheduled caste. The awakening among them. He has become almost a prophet to them. He is a prophet for the future, for the whole of India, but in particular, he is a prophet of the Dalits. If anybody criticizes Ambedkar and his contribution to the Dalit cause, he can never accept friendship from these people. And I am very sorry that that lady has not been reprimanded and no thesis has been written against that. It means that that policy continues. I wonder why the communists did not attack the Hindus, the Muslim religion, why they took to attack Buddhism, which according to me, in one particular form, their identity, their cultural awakening, their independent thought is a must in the Indian context. The Dalits cannot move out of their drudgery unless they give up Hinduism, and that is the easiest alternative found out by Dr. Ambedkar. Anybody who says that Buddhism is wrong for the scheduled caste or the Dalits is an enemy of the Dalits. This is, I say, and the earlier the communists come to realize all these things. Now look, in the last Republic Day parade, the government put up the statue of Dr. Ambedkar. See, they are appropriate Dr. Ambedkar, and the communists are criticizing Dr. Ambedkar. Who is going to attract the voters of these people? It's a funny type of situation. The trouble with the communist movement is that still they belong to the upper caste. They do not want to mix with the lower caste people, so that less they are also pulled down in their social hierarchy. And this is actually a very, very difficult situation. I don't know how they are going to rectify. But we, as our learned professor has told us, that ultimately the two movements have to come together. They have to learn. The communists have to learn from Dr. Ambedkar movement, and Americans have to learn that really, ultimately, it is the communist revolution that is going to change the face of India, and nothing more, nothing less. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree with entirely. This Ranganayak Amma creature, actually, she does not belong to any party per se, but is an ideologue. Been writing a lot and doesn't have any base in the people. So you rightly said that and I also referred the same thing, that when it comes to very much at the ideological level, then they reflect the similar kind of rigid attitude. Okay, so that is not going to work, and earlier they realize it, better it is.
Hi, my name is Rosie, and I'm one of the students at Simon Fraser University. I'm doing international studies with Dr. Harris, and I found your lecture very interesting. But I do have a question, and I wanted to find out, how does we all know that India, brags itself of its economic achievement, which is growing at a rapid pace, and in light of that, there is extreme poverty between the rich and the poor, and a wide gap. So my question is, can India's widening gap in poverty and social development system exacerbated by the neoliberal economic policies, or is it to do with the caste system?
Neoliberalism in India actually resonates with Hindutva and therefore the caste system. That resonance, now it would take time. So it's a resonance of that. The evils are spoken about, that in neoliberalism, the fundamental creeds actually have researched all over the world. Fundamentalist tendencies, etc., have researched in the world. But in India, it actually creates a resonance of kind. So economic thing is definitely due to neoliberalism. It's a neoliberal economy that is there in India. And as you said, that while it mesmerizes people saying that India's growth rate, etc., is very impressive and all, but alongside the kind of inequalities that India is experiencing also are really to be noted. Okay, in India, I do not know such kind of things are known to common people, because in World Bank statistics, etc., if you see, the Gini coefficient is a measure of measuring the inequality, and you would find that in Indian Gini coefficient hovers around something like 35, 36, which is very normal. And China and many other countries which appear to be reasonable, they appear to be far more unequal than Indian society. So when we dug up and started looking at it, I would tell you my own kind of results of the study, that in Indian situation, what we measure is the consumption, not income. Okay. So what appears to be Gini coefficient in Indian context is the consumption inequality, not an income inequality. And if we made the amends and really recast the things, the Indian Gini coefficient worked to 57%, which makes Indian society one of the most unequal societies in the world. Okay. So there are a lot of statistics that is reeled out by the government sources, etc., is really fudged much more deliberately than innocently. No, you cannot identify caste as such, that is actually accentuating the inequalities, etc. As I said, the word is resonating. So neoliberalism also is elitist, caste also is elitist. So all these kinds of things, it is against the lowest strata of people, and it tends to sort of make this inequality, the distance between two, widen. So that is the phenomenon.
Thank you for the talk, Dr. Teltumbde. I had a question at the end. One of the points you made was none of the isms are going to be very helpful. So what is the outcome, desired outcome, which would allow us not to be gathered here? Gathered here, listening to such talks.
So that perhaps I have said it for the futuristic movements. No, all these kinds of isms. When I said that, it does not mean that they have to be discarded.
As human beings, we're selfish. At the same time, we have to be collaborative. So we can't be anything without everyone involved. There's two factors. There's economics and social. So one of the things that maybe the communists were focusing on was the economic aspect, the class. What they neglected to focus on, possibly from what I heard from you, was the social aspect, the self-respect. So I can deal with my station in life if I'm respected. If I choose to be at a certain state, if I'm happy with, just sleeping on a cot, I'm happy with sleeping on a cot. If I want to go fly around in a jet, then I do whatever I do to struggle, which is what the communists never took into account, which is why everything became the lowest common denominator. So given the fact that we as human beings simply desire to be respected as human beings, which is our right, and when someone takes that right away is when we are truly angry and feel that we can't do anything because someone puts us down by violence or some other means. So where do we go from here? Because the struggles of the people who are here or in India who have benefited from the positive law changes over the years are not the same. Their station in life economically is different than the people who haven't.
Yeah, this dichomatization of social and economic firstly needed to be problematized. That it does not remain as a compartment in life. Those people who come up economically also have gained this in social terms. Okay, in caste context, certainly it does not cannot be simplistically spoken like that, unfortunately, and that is our context. So. But it stays, as I said, like the communists have not paid attention and mistakenly focused on just economic. Actually, it was not supposed to be so. In the original formulation of Marx, etc., it is not that the classes actually refer to the economic aspects. It needed to be taken. The classes are to be considered in the concrete situation. So as regards where do we go from here? We have to build these bridges really. In Indian context, definitely this bridge needs to be built. The earlier, the better. Otherwise, this is going into something like it would rot for quite some time. The people would. What is happening in India is something like a growing lumpenization that is happening in this, because people are totally sans ideologies, owns ideological directions, and any hope for that matter. So most of the people are taking into get misled to lumpen kinds of activities, or the short-termism, getting into some parties fold, etc., and earn some money. So people will have to struggle. There is no the ultimate I said that there has to be, the solution is Indian revolution. And let's see, because it might appear something like light years away, but that is the solution. We have to, the thoroughgoing change in the system itself is the solution.
Uh, you said Islam was the first religious ideology that made some dent in casteism. If you look at history in India, I'm just, as your opinion, what you think about effect of Sikhism in North India in that sense? Specifically, do you just see that as a manifestation of being in Punjab and therefore affected by Islam, or is it? Do you see it as a reform movement and as an egalitarian project? Is it a total failure in your sense, in your opinion? Yeah, Sikhism. Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll accumulate the questions and then maybe I might have to say something or not.
Well, like my sister Rosie here, we are diasporic Indians from East Africa. So our view of India is from outside. So recently, at the rise of the Aam Aadmi Party, I thought maybe that there was some sort of a coming together of something that can be coming together as an opposition to the BJP and so on. What are your thoughts on something like that or something else that could be a uniting force?
मुझे सर पूछना है कि आपने एक्सप्लेन किया हिस्टोरिकली सीपीआई का जो रोल है दलित मूवमेंट को लेके आई एम एग्री विद यू बट मतलब उसके बाद आपने जो भी सारा एक्सप्लेन किया कि लास्ट में जो मतलब दलित मूवमेंट का जो मतलब या कास्ट का एनिहिलेशन होना है वो रेवोल्यूशन के जरिए ही होना है। मुझे आपकी राय जाननी है 1980 के बाद जो मतलब इंडिया के अंदर लेफ़्ट मूवमेंट नॉट पार्लियामेंट्री लेफ़्ट मैं स्पेसिफिकली पॉइंट आउट करना चाहूँगा कि जो माओइस्ट मूवमेंट का स्टैंड है आइडियोलॉजिकल स्टैंड है उसके बारे में आपका क्या कहना है?
Yeah, okay. So what I said about the Muslims, etc., is not in terms of ideology, but actually ideology played a part, but it's an alternate civilizational paradigm that was created first time in India, which attracted the low caste. And the dent was made into demographic terms. They were not so much in egalitarian, Islam, etc., is definitely there, and that influenced the exodus. But that actually dent was in terms of the demography. Physically people moved out of the Hindu fold and became Muslims. About Sikhism, Sikhism or all other religions which were born in India were the revolt against Brahmanism, as a matter of fact. But in practice, they actually remained the same. It's a fact that Sikhism also carried castes. So Sikh community that came into being also had caste intact. So Sikhism, as all of us approximately know, that Sikhism is ideologically against caste, but it did not remain. Rather, Babasaheb Ambedkar, when he announced that he would renounce Hindu religion, that time Sikhism really was in his repertoire and topmost. He had sent a team to Amritsar to study Sikhism, and in his son himself was a part. So that is a history. So he had fully given consideration to Sikhism. Sikhism actually ranked very, very much at the top. And the Khalsa College in Bombay, this all Akalis, etc., discussions with Ambedkar, etc., and Babasaheb Ambedkar himself had prompted that you start a college here, and Khalsa College is the product of that. Okay, it came into Bombay, it stands today also, but not many people probably know the history. That this was the first the material kind of offering that Sikhs made to attract him towards Sikhism, and he tried it out. Now, Aam Aadmi Party is an electoral kind of experiment, not to be read so much about. Okay, so these people came and piggybacked on the corruption and Lokpal bill and so on and so forth. That's the history, etc. But the way these people have been conducting themselves, okay, is a problematic. I do know some of the characters, main characters personally. So the way they reflect, they probably no better than Modi if they come to power. Rather, Aam Aadmi Party is slated to come to power in my state. Now, currently, I'm in Goa. So Goa, their opinion polls, etc., ranking them to the top, much ahead of BJP. So that might happen. Maybe in Punjab also they can make a big dent. I don't know, but not to be hoped. Nothing, no parliamentary party in India actually can go any long distance so far as emancipation of people are concerned. And we are actually talking that language. Ideological stand, Maoist movement, etc. And see, Maoist movement, I would only say that Maoist movement, I would respect it as the only tangible resistance to the Indian system. Okay, but unfortunately, they have been cornered so much that there's a problematic. So ideologies, etc., apart, they are ideologically they have there has been a array of changes, etc. Start with something like Mao as our chairman, and the agrarian revolution and all those kinds of things. There is so much of ideology, and in transition there has been so much too. But ideology has not been a mainstay of Maoist movement. Their action has been. And action has really reassured people to be the single most resisting force to the Indian ruling classes. But unfortunately, again, they are cornered so much that there is not much much may be hoped from that.
Thank you, Dr. Teltumbde, for a very, very stimulating talk, and thank you all for coming. I found your talk indeed very thought-provoking. It gives us a lot of material to take home and think about. Fundamentally, most importantly, I think the point you begin with, which is that the dichotomy of class and caste is a false one in India, and we have to recognize that the two are not indeed dichotomous, but the two have to be understood as integrally related to each other in India. That is a profound point, and I think we really have to think about it a great deal. I think the second point that I found really impressive and thought-provoking was that that there has been a persistence of caste. Far from the annihilation of caste that Ambedkar profoundly and rightly talked about, there has been a persistence of caste, and in the communist movement, and that persistence of caste is really the basic reason why the revolution in India has not come. Though the conditions for revolution have been ripe, though the movement has been strong, though there have been several attempts at revolution, revolution has not come because of the persistence of caste. The third point I think that I found really impressive and that makes me think, and I have to think a great deal about it, is the iconization. The iconization of Marx on the left and the iconization of Ambedkar among the Dalits. Profound thinkers give us much to think about and to translate their thought into our life through practice. Instead of that, when we iconize these thinkers, we fixate their thought, we do not translate it into practice, we do not put it into the dynamics of life, into the concrete practicalities dynamic of life, but we make formulas out of their life glorify their images and worship formulas. By that, we miss life. And we become victims. I think this was a profound point. I really need to think about this. I think we all need to think about this. And iconization as the instrument of our own oppression. Through iconization, it's not only appropriation, somebody else can appropriate our icons, but we create our own oppression through iconization. And the last and the equally profound point, possibly the ultimate point that you make, is the necessity of understanding the process in which we are, and not get caught up in the ism, not get caught up in fixated ideas, but to understand that isms, those ideologies, those principles are guides, and we got to examine them against concrete conditions which are never stable, never static. They're always dynamic, they're always changing. And therefore, our practice, which is what really matters, this practice has to be based on a constant critique of our own practice and the ideas by which we act. And without this reflection, without this critique, we are stuck in a static rut. What we need to do, therefore, is to examine ourselves, examine our practice continuously. And this practice is dynamic. And therefore, we've got to break out of the isms and think of practice. I think we have a lot to think about. Thank you.